I was fixing to shower when my wife ran in, naked, breathless, panicking. Then I heard it. Someone else in my house. What I found in my closet ended my marriage instantly. But the DNA test weeks later, that revealed a betrayal far worse than adultery. My name is David Grant. I'm 44 years old, and until 3 weeks ago, I thought I had a pretty good life. I'm the director of operations at Kellerman Manufacturing, a job that pays well, but demands every ounce of energy I have. My wife, Emily, is a regional manager at First National Bank, managing 3 branches across the county. We have 2 sons, Noah, who's 14, and Ryan, who just turned 7. Noah isn't biologically mine or Emily's. He's the son of my best friend Jake and his wife Melissa, who died in a car accident when Noah was barely 2 years old. We've been close to them since college, and when the accident happened, there was never a question about what we'd do. We took Noah in and raised him as our own. For years, everything seemed fine. We had our routines, our weekend barbecues, our family movie nights. Sure, Emily and I had grown distant over the past year or so, but I chalked it up to work stress and the general grind of raising kids. I figured we'd reconnect once things calmed down. I was wrong. It was a Tuesday evening when everything fell apart. I come home early for once, planning to fix that damn shower head in the master bathroom that had been dripping for weeks. Emily had mentioned it at least a dozen times, and I'd kept putting it off. So there I was, wrench in hand, kneeling on the tile floor with the water shut off, finally getting around to it. The house was quiet. The boys were at soccer practice. Noah's team and Ryan's team practiced at the same complex, which made pickups easier. Emily had texted me earlier saying she'd get them after a gym session. I was focused on tightening the fixture when I heard the front door slam open. Then footsteps. Fast, heavy, panicked. I barely had time to register what was happening before the bathroom door burst open. Emily stood there, completely naked, her hair soaked and plastered to her shoulders, water dripping down her skin. Her chest was heaving like she'd just sprinted a mile. Her eyes went wide the second she saw me crouched there with the wrench still in my hand. For a frozen moment, neither of us moved. My first thought was that something terrible had happened. Maybe she'd been attacked. Maybe there was an emergency. But then I saw her face. It wasn't fear. It wasn't panic about some external threat. It was guilt. Pure, unmistakable guilt. David, she gasped, her voice breaking. I thought you were still at work. I stood slowly, setting the wrench down on the counter. My heart was pounding now, a sick feeling spreading through my chest. What's going on, Em? She opened her mouth, closed it, then looked away. That's when I heard it. A faint sound from down the hallway. A door closing. Someone else was in my house. I moved past Emily before she could say another word. She grabbed my arm, her wet fingers slipping against my skin, but I shook her off. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of what was happening, but my body was already in motion. David, wait. Emily's voice came out high and desperate. I didn't wait. I walked down the hallway, toward our bedroom, my footsteps heavy on the hardwood floor. The door was half open, and I could see the bed was perfectly made, the comforter smooth and unwrinkled. Too perfect, like someone had taken the time to fix it. Then I saw it, a phone on the nightstand. Not Emily's phone. I picked it up, and the screen lit up with a notification. Matt was the name at the top, with a message that made my stomach turn. Is he gone yet? My jaw tightened. I turned slowly, holding up the phone. Emily had followed me into the room, grabbing a robe from the hook behind the door and pulling it around herself. Her face was ashen. Who's Matt? I asked, my voice deadly calm. She swallowed hard, her eyes darting to the phone and then to the closet. That's when I heard again, a faint rustling sound like fabric shifting. Someone was hiding in my closet. I walked over to the closet door and yanked it open. There, pressed against the back wall between hanging shirts and jackets, was a man. He was shirtless, his jeans unbuttoned, his face flushed with either exertion or fear, probably both. He looked younger than me, fit, with dark hair that was still damp with sweat. For a second, nobody moved. The 3 of us just stood there in this horrible frozen tableau. Then the man, Scott, I would later learn his name was Scott Richards, stepped forward with his hands up. Look, man, I can explain. I grabbed him by the arm and hauled him out of the closet. He stumbled, nearly falling, and I shoved him toward the bedroom door. Emily screamed something, but I wasn't listening. All I could hear was the sound of my own blood pounding in my ears. "Get out," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "Get the hell out of my house." Scott scrambled to grab his shirt from the floor, but Emily suddenly rushed between us, her hands pressed against my chest. "David, stop. Just listen for a second." I looked down at her, this woman I'd been married to for 15 years, and I didn't recognize her. "Listen to what, Emily? Listen to you explain why there's a half-naked man hiding in our closet." Scott was backing toward the door, holding his shirt against his chest like a shield. "She told me you guys were separated," he blurted out. "She said you were getting divorced." I froze. My eyes snapped to Emily. "Is that what you told him?" Her face flushed red. It's not like that. Answer the question." My voice came out sharper than I intended, and Emily flinched. "Did you tell him we were separated?" She bit her lip, tears starting to form in her eyes. But she didn't answer. She didn't have to. The guilt was written all over her face. Scott took that moment to bolt. I heard him running down the hallway, the front door slamming a few seconds later. I stood there staring at Emily, Scott's phone still in my hand, my mind trying to process what had just happened. My wife had been cheating on me. In our house. In our bed. With some guy who thought we were getting divorced. Emily's voice broke through my thoughts. "David, please, just let me explain." "Explain what?" I cut her off, my voice cold. "Explain why you've been lying to me. Explain why you brought another man into our home." She wrapped her robe tighter around herself, tears streaming down her face now. "It's not what you think." "Then what is it, Emily?" I took a step toward her, and she backed up against the dresser. Because from where I'm standing, it looks pretty damn clear. She opened her mouth, closed it, then tried again. "You've been so distant. You're always working, always stressed." I felt invisible. I let out a harsh laugh. "So that's your excuse? I was working too much, so you decided to sleep with someone else." "It's not an excuse." Her voice rose, defensive now. "I'm just trying to make you understand." "Understand what?" "That you're a liar." I shook my head, rage and disgust washing over me in waves. "How long, Emily? How long has this been going on?" She looked away, biting her lip. "Look at me," I demanded. "How long?" "For months," she whispered. "For months. A third of a year. All those late nights at work. All those extra gym sessions. All those times she'd been distant and distracted." It all made sense now. I ran a hand through my hair, trying to steady myself. That's when I noticed something, or rather, the absence of something. "Where's your wedding ring?" Emily's hand instinctively went to her left ring finger, which was bare. Her face paled even more. I lost it." "You lost it," I repeated flatly. She nodded quickly, too quickly. "Yeah, at the gym. I took it off to shower, and it must have slipped down the drain. I've been meaning to tell you." "When did this happen?" "Last week. Maybe 2 weeks ago. I don't remember exactly." I stared at her, and I could see the lie forming in real time. She was scrambling, making it up as she went along. "You don't remember when you lost your wedding ring." I was upset about it. I looked everywhere. I turned and walked out of the bedroom. Emily followed me, her voice rising in panic. "David, where are you going?" I didn't answer. I went to the laundry room, where I'd been meaning to organize the shelves for weeks. There, on the top shelf behind some cleaning supplies, was a small box I'd found a few days ago while looking for light bulbs. I'd meant to ask Emily about it, but had forgotten in the chaos of work. I grabbed the box and walked back to the bedroom, where Emily stood frozen in the doorway. I opened the box. Inside was her wedding ring. The silence that followed was deafening. Emily's face went from pale to crimson, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "You want to try that story again?" I asked quietly, holding up the ring. Emily stared at the ring in my hand, her mouth working but no sound coming out. Finally, she managed. I didn't know where it was. I must have taken it off and forgotten. "Stop." I held up my hand, and she fell silent. "Just stop lying. You've done enough of that already." Her face twisted with a mixture of shame and defiance. "Fine. You want the truth." I took it off because I didn't want to wear it anymore. "Is that what you wanted to hear?" The words hit me like a physical blow. I nodded slowly, something cold and hard settling in my chest. "Yeah, that's the truth I needed to hear." I walked past her, back into our bedroom, and pulled out my duffel bag from the top of the closet. Emily followed, her panic returning. "What are you doing? What does it look like?" I started throwing clothes into the bag, shirts, jeans, socks, underwear. Everything I need for a few days. You're leaving? Her voice went up an octave. You can't just leave. I turned to face her, and whatever she saw in my expression made her take a step back. Watch me. What about the boys? She demanded, playing her last card. You just going to walk out on them? I'm not walking out on them, I said, my voice hard. I'm walking out on you. There's a difference. I zipped up the bag and headed for the door. Emily grabbed my arm, her nails digging in. David, please. We can fix this. We can go to counseling. I pulled my arm free, not roughly but firmly. There's nothing to fix, Emily. You made your choice when you brought him into our home. When you lied to me for 4 months. When you took off your wedding ring. I made a mistake, she cried, her voice breaking. I'm sorry. I'll end it with him. I swear. You're not sorry you did it, I said quietly, meeting her eyes. You're sorry you got caught. There's a big difference. I walked toward the front door, and she followed, increasingly desperate. Where are you going to go? That's not your concern anymore. What am I supposed to tell the boys when they get home? I stopped at the door, my hand on the knob, and turned back to her one last time. Tell them the truth, Emily. For once in your life, tell the truth. I walked out, and she stood in the doorway, crying. But I didn't look back. I couldn't. If I looked back, I might lose my resolve, and I needed to get out of there before I said or did something I'd regret. I got in my car and sat there for a moment, my hands on the steering wheel, trying to process everything that had just happened. My phone buzzed. Emily, already calling. I declined the call and pulled out of the driveway. I drove without a real destination in mind, just needing to put distance between myself and that house. Eventually, I pulled into the parking lot of a hotel off the highway. It was one of those extended stay places, nothing fancy, but it would do. As I was checking in, my phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't Emily. It was a text from Noah. Dad, where are you? Mom's crying and won't tell us what happened. My heart sank. I hadn't wanted the boys to find out like this, but I should have known Emily would fall apart the second they got home. I texted back, I'll call you in a few minutes. Everything's going to be okay. But as I hit send, I realized I didn't know if that was true. I sat in the hotel room, phone in hand, trying to figure out what to say to Noah. How do you explain to a 14-year-old that his life is about to be turned upside down? That the family he's known for 12 years is falling apart? Before I could call him, my phone rang again. Noah's name flashed on the screen. I answered. Hey, buddy. Dad, what's going on? His voice was tight with worry. Mom won't stop crying, and Ryan keeps asking what's wrong. She just keeps saying you'll explain. I took a deep breath. I need you to take Ryan to his room and stay with him for a bit, okay? I'll come by in an hour and we'll talk. Is it bad? My throat tightened. Yes, son. It's bad. There was a pause, and then Noah said something that made my blood run cold. It's about Mom and that guy, isn't it? I sat up straight, my heart hammering. What guy? The guy who's been coming around. Noah's voice dropped to barely a whisper. I saw him a few times. He'd show up when you weren't home. I didn't know if I should say anything. My hand started shaking. How long have you known? A couple months, maybe. I wasn't sure what was happening at first. I thought maybe he was a friend from her work or something. But then, I don't know, Dad. Something felt off. I closed my eyes, guilt washing over me. My son had been carrying this burden, probably torn between loyalty to his mother and wanting to tell me the truth. Noah, listen to me. This is not your fault. None of this is your fault, okay? I should have told you. His voice broke. I should have said something. No, I said firmly. You're a kid. This was never your responsibility. Your mom and I, we're the adults. This is on us. Are you and Mom getting divorced? The question hung in the air. I hadn't even thought that far ahead yet, but hearing Noah ask it made the reality crash down on me. I don't know yet, buddy. But right now, I need some space from her. That doesn't mean I'm leaving you and Ryan. I'll never leave you guys. I want to stay with you, he said quickly. When you figure things out, I want to live with you. My heart broke and swelled at the same time. We'll talk about all of that. Right now, I need you to be strong for your brother, okay? I'll be there soon. After I hung up, I sat there staring at the wall. Noah had known. My 14-year-old son had been watching his mother's affair unfold and had been too scared or confused to say anything. That thought made me angrier than anything else that had happened today. I grabbed my keys and headed back to the house. I owed my sons a face-to-face conversation, and I needed to get some more of my things. When I pulled into the driveway, Emily's car was still there, but the house was quiet. I used my key and walked in. Noah was sitting on the stairs, waiting. Ryan was nowhere in sight. He's watching TV in his room. Noah said, standing up. I told him you were coming. I pulled Noah into a hug, and he held on tight. I'm sorry, Dad. You have nothing to be sorry for, I said into his hair. Nothing. When I pulled back, I saw tears in his eyes. Is Mom a bad person? That was the question I'd been dreading. No, son. She's not a bad person. She made bad choices. There's a difference. It doesn't feel different. I know. But one day, you'll understand that people are complicated. Even the people we love. Emily appeared at the top of the stairs, her eyes red and swollen. When she saw me with Noah, something flickered across her face. Fear, maybe, or shame. David, can we talk? Not right now. I kept my arm around Noah's shoulders. I came to talk to the boys. They're my sons too, she said, coming down the stairs. I have a right. You lost that right when you brought another man into this house, I said quietly, aware that Noah was listening to every word. When you lied to them, just as much as you lied to me. Emily's face crumpled. That's not fair. Fair. I let out a bitter laugh. You want to talk about fair? Was it fair that Noah's been watching you sneak around for months? That he's been carrying that weight because he didn't know what to do? Emily's eyes shot to Noah, shock written all over her face. You knew. Noah looked down at his feet, and I squeezed his shoulder. He's not the one on trial here, Emily. You are. I guided Noah toward the living room. Go get your brother. We're going to have a family meeting. While Noah went upstairs, Emily followed me into the living room. David, please. We need to talk about this. What's there to talk about? I turned to face her. You've been cheating on me for 4 months. You told your boyfriend we were getting divorced. You took off your wedding ring. What exactly do you think we need to discuss? How we're going to move forward, she said desperately. How we're going to explain this to the boys. How we're going to... There is no we anymore, Emily. My voice was flat, final. You made sure of that. Noah came back down with Ryan, who looked confused and scared. At 7 years old, he didn't understand what was happening, but he knew something was very wrong. I sat down on the couch and pulled Ryan onto my lap. Noah sat next to me. Emily stood awkwardly by the doorway, like she didn't know if she was welcome in her own living room. Guys, I started, looking at both my sons. You know that your mom and I love you very much, right? Ryan nodded. Noah just stared at his hands. Sometimes, grown-ups make mistakes. I continued carefully. Big mistakes. And those mistakes can hurt the people around them. Are you and Mom getting a divorce? Ryan asked, his voice small. I glanced at Emily, who was crying silently. We're going to take some time apart, I said. I'm going to be staying somewhere else for a while. Because Mom did something bad? Ryan asked, out of the mouths of babes. Yeah, buddy. Because Mom made some choices that hurt our family. Ryan turned to look at Emily. Why did you do something bad, Mommy? Emily's face twisted with anguish. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. For once, she had no excuses, no explanations that would make sense to a 7-year-old. I saved her from having to answer. Sometimes people make mistakes, Ryan. What matters is what we do after. Right now, I need you and Noah to know that none of this is your fault. You didn't do anything wrong. Can we come stay with you? Noah asked suddenly. Emily made a choke sound. No, I want to stay with Dad, he said, looking at her directly for the first time. I don't want to be here. You can't just take them. Emily started. I'm not taking anyone, I said. But if they want to stay with me for a few days, I think that's reasonable. 2 days later, I was sitting in my hotel room with the boys when I finally made the call I'd been dreading. My mother, Patricia Grant, had been a family law attorney for over 40 years before she retired. She was tough, sharp as a tack at 70, and she didn't suffer fools. I knew exactly what her reaction would be when I told her what Emily had done. David, her voice was crisp when she answered. Is everything all right? You don't usually call on a Wednesday afternoon. Mom, I need your help. I glanced at the boys, who were watching TV, but definitely listening. Emily and I are separating. I need a lawyer. There was a long pause. Then, in a voice colder than I'd ever heard from her, she asked, what did she do? I should have known better than to think I could hide anything from her. She's been having an affair. For 4 months. I caught her with the guy in our house. Another pause, longer this time. When she spoke again, her voice had shifted from mother to attorney. Where are you now? Extended stay hotel, Off, Route 40. I have the boys with me. Good. Keep them there. Don't let her have unsupervised access until we establish a temporary custody arrangement. I could hear her moving, probably already pulling out her notepad. I'm coming over. We need to talk strategy, and I need to hear everything. Every detail, David. Don't leave anything out. Mom, I don't want to drag you into this. Drag me into this. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. Son, she brought another man into my grandchildren's home. She lied to you and manipulated those boys. She's lucky I'm only coming as your attorney and not as their grandmother, because if I went that route, she'd regret ever crossing this family. An hour later, there was a knock on the hotel room door. I opened it to find my mother standing there with her briefcase, looking like she was ready for war. She hugged me briefly, then pulled back and studied my face. You look terrible, she said bluntly. Thanks, Mom. She walked into the room and immediately went to the boys. Noah, Ryan, how are my grandsons doing? We're okay, Grandma, Noah said, though his voice suggested otherwise. She kissed both their foreheads, then turned to me. Conference room. Now. I followed her to the small business center off the lobby. Once we were alone, she pulled out a legal pad and pen. Start from the beginning. Don't leave anything out. I told her everything. Finding Emily naked and panicked, discovering Scott in the closet, the lie about them being separated, the wedding ring, Noah knowing for months. My mother took notes, her expression growing harder with each detail. When I finished, she set down her pen and looked at me. We're going for full custody. Mom, don't mom me. She brought a stranger into a home with your children. She manipulated Noah into keeping secrets. She lied about your marriage status to facilitate her affair. Any judge will see this for what it is. A woman who put her own desires above the safety and well-being of her children. What about Emily's job? Her position at the bank? My mother smiled, and it wasn't pleasant. Her job is about to become very relevant. She's a regional manager at First National, correct? That means she has a morality clause in her contract. Extramarital affairs, especially when they impact the bank's reputation, are grounds for termination. I stared at her. You're going to get her fired? I'm not going to do anything. But if certain facts become public knowledge during divorce proceedings, well, that's just a natural consequence of her choices. My mother left around dinner time, promising to file the initial divorce paperwork first thing in the morning. I felt simultaneously relieved and terrified. This was really happening. My marriage was over. That night, I couldn't sleep. Around midnight, I found myself scrolling through my phone, looking at old photos of Emily and me. Happier times. Vacations, holidays, moments when I'd actually believed we had something real. Then I remembered something. A few months ago, Emily had insisted I get tested for high blood pressure. She'd been unusually persistent about it, making the appointment for me and everything. At the time, I thought she was just being caring. Now I wondered. The next morning, I called my doctor's office and requested a full copy of my medical records. When they asked why, I said I was switching doctors. It wasn't entirely a lie. I'd probably need to find someone closer to wherever I ended up living. The records arrived via email that afternoon. I skimmed through them, not really sure what I was looking for. Then I saw it. Buried in the test results from 3 months ago was a notation I'd never seen before. Patient shows signs of long-term infertility. Recommend follow-up with specialist if attempting to conceive. I read it 3 times, my heart pounding harder with each pass. Long-term infertility. The doctor had noted it, but never mentioned it to me. Why would he, when Emily and I already had 2 kids? Except we didn't. We had Noah, who was adopted, and we had Ryan, who was 7 years old. Ryan, who had Emily's eyes and smile. Ryan, who I'd held in the hospital the day he was born, never questioning that he was mine. My hand started shaking. I looked over at Ryan, who was playing a video game on the hotel TV, completely oblivious to the bomb that had just gone off in my head. 7 years old. Emily's affair had been going on for 4 months. But what if it wasn't the first time? What if there had been others? What if Ryan wasn't my son? I stood up abruptly, startling both boys. I need to make a call. I'll be right back. I stepped outside the hotel room and immediately called my mother. She answered on the first ring. David, what's wrong? I need a DNA test, I said, my voice shaking. For Ryan. There was a pause. Then carefully she asked why. I told her about the medical records, about the infertility notation, about the timeline, that suddenly didn't make sense. When I finished, my mother was silent for a long moment. "Get the test," she finally said, quietly. "Don't tell Emily yet. If Ryan isn't yours, it changes everything about the custody case." "Jesus, Mom. He's 7 years old. He's my son, regardless of biology." "I know that, and you know that. But Emily doesn't get to lie about something this fundamental. If she's been deceiving you about Ryan's paternity for 7 years, that's fraud. That's another level of betrayal entirely." I knew she was right, but the thought made me sick. I ordered a paternity test kit online, express delivery. It would arrive tomorrow. Then I'd have to swab Ryan's cheek and wait for results that might destroy what was left of my world. That night, I watched Ryan sleep in the hotel bed next to Noah. He looked so peaceful, so innocent. Whatever that test said, he was my son. I'd raised him, loved him, been there for every milestone. Biology didn't change that. But Emily's lies did. If she'd been lying about this too, there would be no mercy. Not anymore. The courthouse was cold that morning, or maybe it was just me. My mother sat beside me at the plaintiff's table, looking every bit the formidable attorney she'd been for 4 decades. Across the aisle, Emily sat with her lawyer, a man named Richard Thornton who looked uncomfortable with the case he'd been handed. We were here for the custody hearing. My mother had pushed for an expedited schedule, arguing that the children's welfare was at stake. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s named Judge Patricia Brennan, had agreed. "Mr. Grant," Judge Brennan said, looking at me over her reading glasses, "I've reviewed the evidence submitted. It's quite extensive." That was putting it mildly. My mother had compiled a file that would make a prosecutor jealous. Photographs of text messages, bank statements showing Emily's withdrawals for hotel rooms, witness statement from neighbors who'd seen Scott's car in our driveway, and the DNA test results proving Ryan wasn't my biological son. But the most damaging evidence was what Noah had provided. Screenshots of messages Emily had sent her, instructing her to keep the affair secret, manipulating a 14-year-old into complicity. "Your Honor," my mother stood, "my client is seeking primary custody of both children. The evidence clearly shows that Mrs. Grant engaged in a pattern of deception that directly involved the children, creating an unstable and emotionally harmful environment." Emily's lawyer stood as well. "Your Honor, Mrs. Grant admits she made a mistake, but she's still a fit parent. She has a stable job, a stable home." About that job, my mother interrupted smoothly. "We've been in contact with First National Bank's HR department. Mrs. Grant's employment contract includes a morality clause. Given that her affair has now become public record through these proceedings, the bank is conducting an internal review." Emily's face went white. She whispered something urgent to her lawyer, who looked even more uncomfortable. Judge Brennan held up a hand. "I'm not here to adjudicate employment matters. However, Mrs. Grant, I am troubled by the evidence showing you involve your 14-year-old stepson in concealing your affair. That shows a serious lapse in judgment." "Your Honor, I never meant," Emily started, but the judge cut her off. "I'm also troubled by the paternity fraud. Mr. Grant has been raising Ryan as his own son for 7 years, only to discover through infidelity-related DNA testing that the child isn't biologically his. Yet he still wants custody. That speaks volumes about his character." My mother presented the final piece of evidence, a letter from Noah, written in his own hand, explaining how he'd witnessed his mother's affair and had been too afraid to tell anyone. How he'd felt guilty and confused, torn between protecting his mother and wanting to tell me the truth. Judge Brennan read it silently, her expression growing harder. When she finished, she set it down and looked directly at Emily. "Mrs. Grant, your actions didn't just betray your husband. You betrayed your children's trust. You put them in impossible positions and created an environment of secrecy and lies." She paused. "I'm granting Mr. Grant primary physical custody of both children. You will have supervised visitation every other weekend until such time as the court deems otherwise." Emily's composure shattered. She began crying, her lawyer putting a hand on her shoulder. But I felt nothing but relief. My boys would be with me. They'd be safe. As we left the courtroom, my mother squeezed my shoulder. "You did good, son. Those boys are lucky to have you." I looked back to see Emily still sitting at the table, her lawyer packing up papers while she sobbed. Part of me felt sorry for her, but mostly I just felt free. 8 months later, life had settled into something resembling normal. I bought a house closer to the boys' school. Nothing fancy, but it was ours. Noah had his own room, and Ryan did too, though he still sometimes crawled into my bed after nightmares. The DNA results had devastated me initially, but they'd also freed me from any remaining guilt. Ryan was my son, test or not. I'd been there for his first steps, his first words, his first day of school. No piece of paper could change that. Emily had lost her job at the bank 3 weeks after the custody hearing. The morality clause in her contract had been enforced once the details of her affair became public knowledge. She'd found work at a smaller regional bank, but it was a significant step down in both position and salary. Scott Richards had disappeared from the picture entirely. Apparently, being exposed as a homewrecker wasn't good for his personal training business. Last I heard, he'd moved to another state. Noah had started seeing a therapist to work through his feelings about his mother's betrayal. He was doing better, slowly learning that her choices weren't his responsibility. He'd also started calling me Dad more often, something that meant everything to me. Ryan still didn't know about the DNA test. My mother and I had decided to wait until he was older, mature enough to understand that biology doesn't define family. For now, he was just happy to have his own room and a backyard where he could play. Emily's supervised visitation had been a disaster at first. The boys, especially Noah, were angry and resentful. But over time, they'd start to soften. Not forgive. That would take years if it happened at all. But at least they were civil. I ran into Emily at a parent-teacher conference one evening. She looked tired, older somehow. We made awkward small talk about the boys' grades. Then she said something that surprised me. "I'm sorry, David, for everything. I know that doesn't change anything, but I need you to know I regret what I did." I looked at her, this woman I'd spent 15 years of my life with, and realized I didn't feel angry anymore. Just sad. Sad for what we'd lost, for what the boys had lost, for what could have been if she'd made different choices. "I appreciate that," I said finally. "The boys need their mother. I hope you can be the person they need you to be." She nodded, tears in her eyes, and we parted ways. That night, I tucked Ryan into bed and read him his favorite story. Noah poked his head in and asked if we could watch a movie together. We made popcorn and settled on the couch, just the three of us. This was my family. This was home, and it was enough.